There is a hush that precedes revelation. It is not the silence of peace, but the silence that follows the collapse of hope. In this stillness, one hears the soft, persistent scratching of reality against the walls of the soul. We begin here, at the edge of the known, with the mind's vanity folded in upon itself. All stories having run their course, every myth of salvation exhausted. Success, the shimmering phantom that men chase with bloodied feet across barren ground. Its promises are many fulfillment. Admiration, release from lack, but beneath the sheen lies only the smooth, cold stone of necessity. To gaze at success is to look upon a distant star, bright but indifferent, burning with a light that never warms. Most drift through life in the shadow of this star, measuring days by the dim radiance it casts upon the self. Childhood is shaped by the expectations of others, by the heavy hand of culture sculpting the pliant will. In every glance, every word of praise or disappointment, the seed of striving is planted, watered by anxiety, fertilized by comparison. From these early years, suffering takes root, not as an accident, but as the inevitable outcome of desire's ceaseless hunger. The will awakens and finds itself bound, not by the world, but by its own nature. It stretches, aches, strains against its chains, mistaking them for circumstances, for misfortune, for injustice. Yet the truth is, sharper suffering is not a flaw in the world's design, but its essence. Existence is lack, endlessly reaching, eternally dissatisfied. No achievement, no laurel, no whispered approval from the crowd can quiet the underlying thirst. The will is a spring that knows only to flow. Its rest is not satisfaction, but exhaustion. It is strange, then, that so much of life is given over to the pursuit of recognition, as if the gaze of others could redeem the loneliness of being. This longing is as old as language. Yet every applause fades, every headline yellows, every statue is eroded by wind and rain. The self that is built from such materials is always in danger, always crumbling, always threatened by the next moment's silence. Modernity sharpens this torment. The ancients bowed before gods and fate. The modern bows before the mirror. The cult of the self, dressed in the finery of progress, demands ever more dazzling performance. Social media amplifies the theater. Each life becomes a curated exhibition, where the pain of obscurity is only matched by the terror of exposure. We are stalked by the eyes of strangers, by the ticking clock of relevance, by the steady drumbeat of our own inadequacy. But beneath the frantic striving, there is an older wisdom, one that surfaces in sleepless hours, in the aftermath of triumph, in the quiet agony of being unseen. It is the wisdom of limits, the recognition that the self is not sovereign, but subject to the iron law of suffering. Success, when stripped of its ornaments, reveals itself as another form of compulsion. The need to be more, to have more, to escape the burden of being what one is. Consider the artist who, after years of toil, finally attains acclaim. The world celebrates, the doors open, the silence is briefly broken, but within, nothing changes. The same restless pulse remains. Achievement only sharpens the edge of the void. The appetite grows, each victory becoming a prelude to the next hunger. There is no arrival, only the endless unfolding of the will, insatiable and blind. The philosopher stands apart, not to escape suffering, but to observe it without flinching. Suffering is not a puzzle to be solved, or a defect to be remedied, but the very signature of existence. Every living thing is defined by lack, the animal by hunger, the plant by reaching, the human by desire. Even love, that most celebrated of fulfillments, is but the will's temporary self-forgetting, a narcotic administered against the pain of separation. What, then, is to be done? Not action, but awareness. Not the forging of new illusions, but the gentle peeling away of the old. The world offers endless distractions, new ambitions, new causes, new hopes. Yet, in the quiet corners of the soul, when all distractions fail, the raw presence of suffering is revealed. It is here, in this unclothed recognition, that a kind of clarity dawns not joy, but release from the compulsion to chase joy. Modernity's promise is progress, more power, more knowledge, more control over fate. But progress is a treadmill, not a ladder. Each step forward is matched by new anxieties, new forms of emptiness. The more the will achieves, the more it invents to desire. The story of civilization is a catalogue of unmet needs, each generation inheriting the restless projects of the last. No innovation, no philosophy, no revolution can annul the primordial fact. To exist is to want, and to want is to suffer. Those who attain success know the strange bitterness that follows. The applause is never enough. The envy of others becomes its own cage, the gold medal, a leaden weight around the neck. Those who fail, meanwhile, are tormented by the illusion that happiness lies just beyond achievement. Both are ensnared by the same delusion that life offers an exit from its own nature, that there is a realm beyond lack. In the night, when sleep will not come and the body lies still, the mind drifts to the unfulfilled, the forsaken, the moments lost to inattention. Regret is the echo of the will's failure to satisfy itself. Nostalgia, its longing for what never was. Every memory is tinged with a sorrow that cannot be explained, a quiet knowledge that all things, even joy, are colored by the shadow of impermanence. The self, so painstakingly assembled, is but a mask worn by the will. Behind the mask, nothing but longing. This is the tragedy of consciousness, to know oneself as both the puppet and the strings, both the dreamer and the dream. The world is rich with forms, but all forms dissolve. The lover is lost, the empire crumbles, the child grows old. To love life is to grieve its passing, to pursue happiness is to court disappointment. Yet within this bleakness, a peculiar comfort emerges, not the comfort of hope, but the comfort of seeing clearly. When the illusion of final victory is surrendered, when success is recognized as a temporary arrangement with emptiness, a different kind of peace takes root. Not the peace of fulfillment, but the peace of ceasing to demand fulfillment from a world that cannot provide it. Society insists on narratives of overcoming, of conquering adversity through willpower and ingenuity. But adversity is not a mountain to be climbed, it is the landscape itself. To live is to suffer, to succeed is to suffer differently, to fail is to suffer anew. This is not pessimism, but sobriety. The intoxicants of hope and ambition may soften the pain, but they cannot remove it. Sooner or later, all men must reckon with the residue of their desires. The marketplace of modern life is a bazaar of distractions. New technologies promise liberation, yet breed new dependencies. New philosophies offer liberation, yet demand new forms of striving. The freedom celebrated in the streets is often the freedom to choose one's shackles. In the pursuit of self-creation, the self is fragmented, rendered anxious by the impossibility of completion. Love itself is not spared. The modern lover seeks in the beloved a solution to the pain of being, yet finds only a temporary mirror for longing. When the mirror cracks, as it must, the old ache returns sharper, more refined, less easily dismissed. The romantic ideal is not a refuge from suffering, but another stage upon which the will performs its endless play. Religion once provided a frame for suffering, a context in which pain could be transmuted into meaning. In the absence of faith, suffering becomes naked, a fact without interpretation, a pain without purpose. Some turn to philosophy, hoping for consolation, but true philosophy offers no consolation. It is the art of looking without blinking at what is, and finding dignity not in overcoming, but in enduring. There are moments, rare and fleeting, when the will grows tired and the mind glimpses the world without desire. In these moments, the world is revealed not as a ladder to be climbed, but as a field of quiet indifference. The birds sing, the wind moves through the grass, the body breathes. There is no story, no project, no self to redeem, only the gentle rhythm of existence, unburdened by hope. Most flee from such moments, for they threaten the narrative of progress. But in truth, they are the only moments free from suffering, the only spaces where the will ceases, if only for a breath. To dwell in this stillness is not to transcend pain, but to be reconciled with its inevitability. To surrender the need for more is not defeat, but lucidity. The myths of childhood haunt the adult, promising rescue through achievement. If only I succeed, I will be whole. If only I am loved, I will be safe. If only I am seen, I will exist. But wholeness is a mirage, safety, a wish, recognition, a passing shadow. The self that seeks these things is itself a construction, a pattern in the sand, soon erased by the tides of time. The true terror of existence is not suffering, but meaninglessness. The will craves significance, a story in which pain is justified by some higher purpose. But the world is silent. The cosmos offers no reply. The only meaning is that which the will projects onto the void, and when the will grows weary, the meaning flickers and dies. Yet the absence of meaning is not the end, but the beginning of clarity. When all justifications have been exhausted, what remains is the bare fact of being. The world is not for us, nor against us. It simply is. Success is not a reward, but a brief interlude in the endless unfolding of necessity. To see this is not to despair, but to awaken from the fever dream of hope. Every culture, every age, invents its own distractions, gods, markets, movements, screens. Each promises escape from the ordinary agony of being alive, yet all ultimately fail, for they are built upon the same foundation, the refusal to accept suffering as elemental. The modern world is especially adept at this refusal, weaving an intricate tapestry of denial. But the pain persists, unmasked by comfort, amplified by speed. In the final reckoning, the human animal is alone. Companionship, achievement, love, these are not solutions, but consolations. The wound remains, untouched by the rituals of success or the ecstasies of romance. This is not cause for shame, but for stillness. The wound is not to be healed, but to be understood. In understanding, the fever of striving cools, the mind grows quiet. There are those who speak of enlightenment, of a final liberation from the cycle of wanting. But even this is but another form of will, the desire to cease desiring. The only freedom is the freedom to see clearly, to rest in the knowledge that nothing will save you, least of all success. The world does not bend to longing, it rolls on, indifferent, a silent theater in which every actor plays his part and is forgotten. This is not nihilism, but sobriety. To abandon hope is not to embrace despair, but to awaken to the present. The mind, stripped of illusion, finds a strange solace in the ordinary, the taste of water, the flicker of sunlight, the hush of night. Each moment is enough, not because it fulfills, but because it simply is. The demand for more fades, replaced by a resigned intimacy with what cannot be changed. Success, as the world defines it, is a mirage that recedes as one approaches. The only victory is the acceptance of defeat, not as a failure, but as the inevitable outcome of being alive. The wise do not chase happiness, nor do they flee from pain. They sit with the raw fact of being, their gaze steady, their breath unhurried. The story of the self is a story of chasing shadows, of confusing movement with progress, accumulation with value. In the end, all stories dissolve, all names are forgotten. The world returns to silence, and in that silence there is a kind of grace. Not the grace of triumph, but the grace of release, the quiet disappearance of the will into the stillness from which it arose. The mind, stripped of its disguises, stands naked before the abyss. There is nothing to be achieved, nothing to be gained. Each day is a rehearsal for surrender, each breath a letting go. In this surrender, the pain does not end, but it ceases to be a problem. It becomes a companion, a reminder of the distance between the world and the self. To look upon suffering without flinching is to find oneself at home in the world, not because it offers comfort, but because it no longer deceives. The last illusion to fall is the illusion of escape. In the collapse of every hope, a deeper stillness emerges the peace that is not sought, because it was never lost, only obscured by the fever of desire. So the candle burns, its flame wavering in the current of time. The wax melts, the room grows dim. In the fading light, there are no more stories, no more promises, no more need to be saved. Only the gentle hush of what is, and the quiet disappearance of the will into silence. And then nothing, not emptiness, but release, not triumph, but the dissolution of all longing. The world remains, indifferent and whole, as the soul vanishes softly, like a sigh in the dark. Night draws its long shadow across the inner landscape. One lies awake, hearing the slow drip of time, each moment a drop of water echoing in an empty chamber. In this darkness, the world's noise recedes, and a starker intimacy emerges. Nothing shields the soul from the naked ache of existing. The illusion of remedy, of eventual consolation, grows faint. There is no future redemption. There is only the eternal return of longing, the heavy pulse of leg beating at the center of all things. Suffering is not some foreign invader, it is the very marrow of life. The will, in its ceaseless agitation, stirs every pleasure into pain by virtue of its restlessness. What is most deeply desired, once possessed, curdles into disappointment or indifference. The sweetness of fulfillment is thin, a surface gloss hiding the underlying bitterness of the insatiable. In joy's aftermath, emptiness creeps in, a silent guest at every feast. Desire fashions 1,000 disguises, yet none deceive for long. The hope of recognition, the fantasy of love's permanence, the mirage of meaning through labor or creation, each glimmers in the mind's theater and vanishes before it can be grasped. The heart's appetite, undiminished, turns to new objects. Unaware, it is itself the source of its torment. Even renunciation becomes another act in this endless performance, the will to escape the will, caught in its own trap. Detachment does not arrive as victory, but as exhaustion. There comes a moment when striving falters, not through enlightenment, but because the will simply grows weary of its own circular pursuit. One gazes on the debris of abandoned dreams and feels neither hope nor resentment, only a stillness that is not peace but absence. Here, the mind glimpses the world as it is, not hostile, not kind, but merely indifferent, a field where all things arise and perish without witness. Illusion is the veil the will draws to spare itself the horror of emptiness. Culture spins its intricate web, promising salvation through progress, through relationship, through achievement. Yet every accomplishment dissolves in the acid of time. Every intimacy is shadowed by loss. Every certainty crumbles under the weight of doubt. The truth persists, unadorned. Nothing holds, nothing lasts, nothing saves. Suffering refines the soul, not into something higher, but into something more transparent. The noise of wanting slowly quiets, replaced by a clear, cold awareness. One learns the silent companionship of sorrow, a patient acceptance that asks for nothing. The self, stripped of its projects, stands exposed. Not a hero, not a victim, merely a fleeting arrangement of hunger and memory, destined to vanish. In this light, detachment is not a triumph of reason over feeling, but the natural settling of dust after the storm of striving. One does not transcend suffering, one simply ceases to be deceived by its disguises. The world, no longer a stage for personal drama, becomes a landscape of passing forms, each flickering for a moment in the indifferent glow of consciousness. There is a strange dignity in resignation, a subtle beauty in accepting that no story, no accomplishment, no relationship can erase the fundamental ache. Each day is another page in a book with no plot, no resolution, only the endless description of longing and loss. The reader grows quiet, the urge to turn the page subsides, and the present moment stands revealed empty, luminous, unclaimed by hope. Love, too, is seen in this light, not as salvation, but as a shared solitude. Two suffering souls meet and recognize their mirrored hunger. For a time, the loneliness is softened, but never abolished. The will briefly forgets itself in the other, but the forgetting cannot last. Love's promise is not fulfillment, but the gentle sharing of burdens, the silent witnessing of each other's impermanence. Thus, detachment is not a wall, but a window. It does not shut out the world. It lets the world pass through, untouched by expectation. The self, lighter by virtue of its losses, drifts quietly through the days, neither clinging nor resisting, its gaze steady, its voice soft. The drama subsides, the suffering remains, but it is no longer an accusation, only a condition of breathing. The mind rests in this recognition, neither celebrating nor mourning, only observing. Success is seen for what it is, a flicker on the surface of an unfathomable sea. Failure is likewise drained of its sting, for the will's judgment holds no power in the face of necessity. What happens, happens. The self endures, then disappears, and the world goes on. In this hush, the difference between pleasure and pain dissolves. Both are the movements of the will, the tremors of a longing that has no object. The body ages, the mind wearies, the heart grows thin with memory. There is no tragedy here, only the gradual unraveling of illusion, the quiet extinguishing of the candle. This, then, is what remains when the will is spent. A kind of silent lucidity, a gaze that neither judges nor seeks. The world, emptied of purpose, becomes translucent, beautiful in its indifference, vast in its futility. The self, freed from the fever of ambition, stands at the threshold of vanishing, not in despair, but in the calm that follows the end of desire. The hours pass unnoticed, marked only by the slow fading of light against the wall. In this half-dark, the mind drifts over old regrets, retracing the failures and small humiliations that have accumulated like dust in the corners of the soul. There is no protest, only a quiet recognition. This, too, is part of the unyielding order. The world is not shaped to soothe or justify the self. It gives, and then it takes away, with the same silent impartiality. Ambition withers, not in a single moment, but gradually, as the world's indifference seeps in. One sees the faces of the successful, their smiles rehearsed, their eyes shadowed by fatigue. Their victories, so envied from a distance, reveal themselves to be hollow antechambers to further longing, thresholds that lead only to new anxieties. The applause that once promised immortality now rings thin, a sound without substance, vanishing before it can be savored. The solitude that once seemed a punishment now becomes a mirror. In its surface, all illusions are stripped away. The stories we tell about ourselves, the striving hero, the misunderstood genius, the persistent survivor, fall apart beneath the weight of repetition. What remains is something smaller, quieter, the awareness of a life that is neither remarkable nor wasted, but simply lived, step by step, into forgetfulness. Detachment is not a turning away from pain, but a learning to sit with it, as one sits with a weathered friend, whose presence is both a comfort and a reminder of all that cannot be changed. Suffering is constant, not because the world is cruel, but because it is unfinished, always slipping away just as it appears most tangible. Every joy is tempered by its ending, every certainty by the seed of its undoing. The promises of modernity, for all their brilliance, dissolve in the light of this realization. The future, that glimmering horizon of progress and redemption, draws no closer. Each technological advance, each new system of belief becomes another layer of distraction, a buffer against the simple, unyielding fact that nothing suffices. The mind, fatigued by hope, begins to see through the fabric of these comforts. There is, in the middle distance, the sound of laughter, the clinking of glasses, the pulse of celebration, but it is distant, sealed away by a membrane of resignation. One observes, but does not join. The pleasures of the many are no longer tempting. Their urgency has faded, replaced by a slow, persistent question. What is left when all striving is exhausted? To sit with this question is to become acquainted with the contours of emptiness. Not a void, not annihilation, but a spaciousness in which the self can no longer hide behind its inventions. Here, in the silence, the boundaries blur between sorrow and acceptance. The ache remains, but it no longer demands a cure. It is simply there, like the color of dusk, inevitable and inexplicable. The world shrinks to the size of a single breath, and in this narrowing there is an unexpected tenderness. The sound of rain against glass, the slow drift of clouds, the fleeting warmth of a hand, these become enough, not because they fill the emptiness, but because they stand quietly within it, asking nothing. The will pauses, exhausted, and in its pause a kind of clarity is born, the realization that being is not a problem to be solved, but a condition to be witnessed. Even the old wounds, the betrayals and disappointments lose their sting. They are woven into the fabric of what is inseparable from the whole. There is no narrative of overcoming, no arc of redemption, only the slow accumulation of experiences that neither justify nor condemn, but simply are. The self loosens its grip, and in letting go finds not peace, but the end of resistance. Every attachment is eventually revealed as provisional, every achievement as fleeting. One does not mourn this fact, nor does one celebrate it. It is merely the weather of existence, shifting and changeable, beyond the reach of will or intention. In this climate, detachment arises naturally not as an act of strength, but as the residue of clarity. The days follow one another with a gentle regularity, each carrying its own measure of sorrow and quiet reprieve. Nothing new is added, nothing truly lost. The self drifts, neither advancing nor retreating, carried by the current of time toward the same destination as all things. In this drift, the drama of ambition dissolves, replaced by the subdued dignity of endurance. It is not escape, but surrender, not the flight from pain, but the acceptance of its necessity. The world remains as it always was, indifferent, elusive, and strangely beautiful in its refusal to yield meaning. The mind, stripped of its defenses, learns to see without desire, to feel without seeking relief. This is the quiet truth at the heart of things, the soft glow that remains after every hope has burned itself out. What remains is a hush without promise, the breath of existence suspended in dusk. One stands on the threshold of nothing more, emptied of hope, emptied even of the wish to be free of hope. The candle's flame, grown thin and blue, flickers in the draught, its last light bending shadows into silence. There is no grand summation, no revelation to complete the arc, only the slow unraveling of the thread that bound desire to the world. Every effort, every longing, every cry of the heart, all spent scattered like dry leaves in the cold wind. The faces of the beloved, the monuments of achievement, the intricate scaffolding of the self, dissolve in this soft, annihilating twilight. The hand opens and finds nothing to hold. The gaze turns inward and meets the still water of the void. Grief, which once surged as protest, now settles as acceptance. The self becomes porous, its boundaries blurring, until there is no longer a distinction between sorrow and peace, between loss and the gentle yielding to what is. Time loosens its hold, and memory fades without regret. The echoes of laughter, the weight of shame, the taste of old joys and ancient wounds, all dim in the gentle erasure that follows the will's fatigue. The longing that once carved hollows in the soul softens into quiet. The ache does not vanish, but it ceases to demand attention. Suffering, no longer a call to action or a puzzle to be solved, lies like snow on the silent field, unmeasured, unquestioned. The world turns indifferent, not as an adversary, but as an old companion who walks beside you, silent and implacable. The drama of meaning surrenders to the stillness of being. The flutter of hope falls away. The mind ceases to interrogate the darkness, content with its depth, asking nothing further of the night. Each moment flows unimpeded, stripped of its project, resting in itself, dissolving as it arrives. There is a strange solace in relinquishment, in allowing the will to pass unnoticed, like a shadow in the dying light. The heart no longer insists, the eyes no longer search. The body, frail and finite, is felt without dread. The inevitable is not resisted, nor is it welcomed. It simply draws near, soft as rain, indifferent as stone. Nothing is conquered, nothing is explained. The last comfort is the absence of striving, the freedom that is not chosen but inherited from exhaustion. The song of suffering quiets into a low hum, indistinguishable from the world's own breath. Here, at the margin, where the self flickers like a spent wick, there is no question left to ask. Only the empty sky, the unmoving air, the silent room. Only the subtle dissolution that is not defeat, but the final relinquishment of the wish to be saved. And so, the soul vanishes, not in despair, but as a sigh, returns to silence. The candle gutters and is gone. There is only the darkness, untroubled and complete, in which every longing finds its end. The world remains, indifferent, unburdened, whole. Nothing breaks the stillness, nothing calls for witness. Only this, the absence of the will, the peace that is not granted, but discovered in the quiet undoing of desire.